crab. It's
Okay,
a big
so
crab
crabs.
machine, and it's like a wedge, and these crabs are on top of it. These big eccentrics that you press the machine into the face, into the muck pile, and these crabs come around and they throw the stuff on a belt that goes through. It's real low equipment. Everything's this low.
Oh wow.
And I guess I was dreaming when I said 16 feet on the thickness. It's probably 8 feet.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's real low. And then you have these shuttle buggies, they're called, that come up and bump against this crab and load up on a belt. And then they haul it down to the stambler, which is like a manure spreader that the rock goes through and it crushes it down.
Yeah.
And anyway, on top of these crabs, there's 2 Zerk fittings, one on each crab. And you grease it till it comes out the top. And we got to that machine. He says, you grease this till it comes out the top. And I said, Jack, it doesn't come out the top. The seals are broken. It comes out the bottom. Oh, bullshit. He says it comes out the top. You just grease it till it comes out the top. I said, okay. And he said, I'll be back. And he walked off. And it had 55-gallon barrel of grease on the truck. So I put it on the Zerk and I held it shut and wired the handle. You could see it coming out the bottom. And
no.
I emptied the grease barrel. And I got cartridges. It was all I had left. When he come back, I still had the same one. And of course, I was a bit of an ass. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, you said grease it until it comes out the top. You can see right there underneath that it don't come out the top, comes out the bottom because the seal is out of it. Oh, he went ballistic.
Yeah.
But it's on him. I was just doing my job.
That's right.
And anyway, that was my Wyoming adventure. My wife came down. I was living at Bundy Pal's Ranch, a place where her dad, an old guy, the last Wyoming cowboy, he owned 38 square miles
Wow.
of Wyoming. And Kathy and I got 141.
$141.90 a month.
Yeah, $141.90 a month.
Plus our room and board.
Plus our room and board.
But
and
we paid for Chris's formula.
We paid for Chris's formula because he wasn't paying for baby food.
And he didn't pay for shampoo or soap or
soap
anything
or
like
any
that.
of that stuff. But we stayed there till May,
April. We
And
got our income tax.
we got our income tax back. We skied out of Wyoming. But we had fun while we were there. We lived 40 miles from town. We didn't have a television.
We had radio.
We had radio only.
We pumped water out in the...
Yeah, out front. It was an old piston pump, hand pump. You had to save water enough the night before to boil the water because it was 40 below. Filled a tea kettle, a 2-gallon tea kettle with boiling water. Shoot her down the pump and pump like hell to get water to come, and then you pump your day's water up.
Wow.
She did.
Yeah.
And we learned how to play chess. I taught her how to play chess.
Had an outhouse.
Had an outhouse. She had a chamber pot. She used the chamber pot.
Is that the one that you have?
No.
And
Thanks, Jim.
but we skied out of there and went back to Yakima. And
Then we went to Spokane,
yeah, we went to Spokane and I went to work for,
out the raceway.
yeah, with her cousin and uncle out at Spokane International Raceway. We built that. That's where I got hurt and got a piece of steel in my arm. Cut all the radial nerve off and the hand dropped like that and
Wow.
stayed there
For 8 months.
for 8 months, and they built me a brace that brought it up like this, and it had another brace up like this, and had rubber bands with things for my fingers so it'd pull up. I could always pull down, but I couldn't pull back up.
Yeah.
I still can't straighten my fingers, but that lasted for 8 months. I was on State Industrial. So
We
the
moved
doctor said it's going to be a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
So there was a house for sale in Yakima across from her grandma, where her grandma lived. So we bought it because we were going to be on State Industrial. 9 months later, they gave me a battery, a 67-volt battery, that you had a ground strap around your arm, and then you had this probe, and you put it right there, and it'd make your little finger move.
Ah.
And you put it here, and it'd make your wrist move. Different nerve ending points, and there you could will yourself not to move, and it'd move you. And they said do that about 20 minutes a day. Well, I done it like 8 hours a day, and the nerve grows about 1/4 of an inch a month, and it had to grow back down.
Wow.
And so 9 months I was back moving it, and he kicked me off State Industrial, so I had to go to work, and went down to the unemployment office, and they shipped me over here to the mine, and coal mine, open pit coal mine, and I worked there the next 20 years until I got disabled
Wow.
in 1994.
So how much is the mine that the one here, how much has that changed in practice and technique?
In
from the
20
time?
years, oh, quite a bit.
Yeah.
The machinery kept getting better and better and better. When I first went there, the cats were new. They had all new equipment all the time, but they had the old long stick on the blade, which worked your arm. And by the time I left, the blade stick's about like this. It's actually a joystick, and you turned it with one hand instead of using steering clutches like a dozer.
Yeah.
The steering clutches were over here, but you
Wow.
had a throttle
What?
in your hand. It was cool. And the equipment had the biggest equipment I've ever seen. Drag lines that were 80-yard buckets on them. And now they're shutting the drag lines down now. I haven't been out to see them yet, but they have shovels that are 80-yard shovels. And they load 250-ton trucks. Great big 35-foot wide truck. And the steam plant itself burns 9 ton of coal a minute,
Wow.
and we mined about 5 million ton a year. And,
So you were there for 20 years?
yes,
21.
21 years.
Yeah.
I started out running equipment and scraper, and then I went to dozer, and then blade and loader. I ran it all. Finally ended up on the drag lines. Learned how to run them, and then I went into management in '85. I went to Boston, and I bossed until '94,
Yeah.
and I got disabled. I got venous insufficiency, which is the veins in your legs got little check valves every 1/4 of an inch.
Yeah.
Well, mine all opened. So
Uh-oh.
the blood stays in your feet. It won't come up.
Uh-huh.
It has a hell of a time coming up. Well, it renders your legs about worthless, like getting up on a piece of equipment. You swing your leg up like getting on a horse.
Uh-huh.
I
So it
can't-
feels like your feet are lead.
legs have
Yeah.
no power in them.
Oh, wow.
And I couldn't get on the equipment. I just absolutely couldn't get on the equipment.
Wow.
And went to the doctors, and they told, of course, I have diabetes, and I have glaucoma, and diabetic retinopathy in my eyes were not in too good a shape.
Huh.
But financially, I'm set because I went into management. I still get 65% of my check,
Uh-huh.
my pay
In '94.
every month. Yeah, in 1994, I get that amount of money a month.
Uh-huh.
Plus, the biggest bonus is I still get my
Insurance.
insurance.
Great.
So, and it's wonderful insurance. It doesn't cost. This last 2 hospital stays didn't cost me a dime.
Wow.
So,
As far as living in this area, this wasn't your first house.
no,
So
no,
what was?
God.
His
That's-
first place,
The move.
CC.
Yeah.
I lived in C.C. Wilson apartment. It was a $55 a month dive.
It's a hole in the ground.
It's still there.
Still renting it for about $55.
I don't know that they're renting it. I think it's all closed up now,
No,
but
no, they still.
is there?
Yeah.
Anyway, we moved from there to Shannon Village, which was an apartment building. Lived on the 2nd story there. That was cool. Chris was a baby.
He was 2.
God, I forgot to tell you about leaving Grandview Mine to come to my my firstborn's
Not Grant, Ponderay.
Ponderay mine when Chris was born. I was underground, and your grandpa, Uncle Ben, he could run the lift, but only in emergency. Well, having a baby is not really an emergency, so I had to drive up from underground, and it's like 30 miles. It's a long ass way, and at 4 or 5 miles an hour.
Oh boy.
You know, no, it ain't. It's probably not 30 miles.
It didn't
Probably
take you that long.
more like 20. And it was. It didn't take me long to get downtown. Well, I got to the dry house. That's what they call the shower room, and I wasn't going to take a shower. And of course, being underground, gross as hell. Uncle Ben convinced me to take a shower. She's just going to yell at me anyway. She's going to be pissed off at you. The last person in the world she wants to see is you, and I couldn't believe that, you know. I showered briefly. I got about half clean. Made it to town, and the last person in the world she wanted to see is me. You caused this, damn it. And they were calling her Mary, and her name is Mary, her legal name is Mary, but she goes by Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
And she wasn't receptive to Mary. She wasn't even answering. So I told them that it was Kathy, and that changed that. But Chris was born.
So he was born in Middling Falls.
Yeah, he's born in Medellin Falls.
Okay.
Now the operating room is a motel room.
Yes. I've been in it.
Yeah.
Stayed in it.
Yeah. He was the most ugliest baby I'd ever seen. Of course, everybody tells you that their babies are the cutest in the world. Boy, he's a hairy little bugger. He's about the most ugliest thing I'd ever seen.
He's all like, okay.
But he did grow on me.
Like a tumor. Like mold.
But now we moved quite a bit over here.
After Shannon Village, we moved out to Rochester, Grand Mound area.
on
and,
Nutmeg.
and we lived on Nutmeg.
Is that when I was?
That's
That's
when
where
you
you
were
were born.
conceived.
No.
You were not born there. We moved from there to Tilley Road.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tilly Road is
Tenino.
where I was born.
And
That's
that's
where
where
Jim was
Jim
born.
came home.
But he was born in 75.
And Chris was born in Medellin Falls. Jim was born in Centralia at the hospital.
Chehalis.
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 Yep,
and-
at St. Peter's.
And Missy was
St.
St.
Helens.
Helens.
Missy was born in Centralia.
Yeah, and then from Tilley Road, we moved to
Oakville.
Oakville. And we lived there for about 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Then we
And
moved to Rochester.
Then we moved back to Grand Mound,
Mm-hmm.
and we bought a little house. That was our first house that we bought.
Yeah.
And there on 191st and Joslin.
Yeah.
And we lived there. 6
till we moved on Roosevelt and Centralia.
till the kids.
We were in
Roosevelt on
Chris,
80.
Chris
I was in the second grade.
no, you went to kindergarten at Fords Prairie first.
Yeah.
And then part of the year at Natchez.
Yeah. And then we moved to Roosevelt,
Then J Street.
and Chris went through like second. He was in third grade when we moved from Roosevelt.
Yeah, that was after the Mountain Blue.
Yeah, and that's when Mount St. Helens blew. We lived on Roosevelt, and we have some pictures of that. And we lived right next to the sale barn, so the kids learned a lot of things about animals.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of pregnancies.
And
Then we moved to J Street. We lived there quite a bit, quite a while.
we lived there
4
until
years.
Chris was in 6th grade.
4
Yeah.
years.
And that,
Then we moved to the Brown House here in Dakota.
and we lived there 4 years.
We lived there 4 years.
You got
Then-
flooded, didn't you?
Not
No,
there.
Not
Not
there.
there.
No.
Then we moved in here, and we've been here ever since.
Wow.
And we've been flooded 3 times.
Yeah, 3 times here.
The first
What the-
time was in
90,
89,
89. Second time
90.
90.
90.
Again,
And the
again,
third
small
time-
ones in 91. Big one in 96.
Yeah.
Wow.
We didn't have water in the house until 96, and then we had 11 inches, and then we raised the house.
Yeah, we raised
Wow.
the house about 6 feet now.
Wow.
40 inches.
Yeah.
Okay, 40 inches.
Tell me, let's get into Aunt Betty. Okay? I want to know as much as I can about her. I know she was a feisty old woman. And I can only imagine she was worse when she was younger. So, paint a picture of Aunt Betty for us.
One of the vivid memories I have is her chasing me around the house, around the outside of the house. I'd forgot what kind of a
This is at Grandview Flats.
bullshit thing I'd
In
done.
the log
I'd
house.
pulled something. She was trying to get me, and I mean, she'd stop to rest on one side of the house, and I'd stop to rest on the other side, and it was an all-day event. I forgot to take into consideration that Dad would be home at 4 o'clock,
Uh-oh.
and 2 against 1 is not cool. And she liked to beat me to death with a hula hoop. Dad just caught me and made me go to her because it would be 10 times worse if he did it.
Uh-huh.
But all in all, she was a good mother. She doted on us kids a lot. In our young years, she was always there, and not so much our young years.
She'd make maple bars.
Oh yeah, she made maple bars. We didn't have much money. We didn't go out to dinner a lot.
Yeah.
Like never. Very, very much. We wouldn't go out probably 2 times a year, 3 times a year. But we always ate real good. We had our own meat and raised a good garden, canned everything. I really don't know what to tell you about her other than
She liked to go into the woods and gather.
yeah, she liked to gather weeds and sticks and mushrooms, and she knew more about the mushrooms, what kind they were. And I wish I'd have paid more attention.
When to get them,
When
where
to get them,
'em.
where to get them.
Yeah.
Roots,
Roots. Yeah,
Wow.
poultices, all
twigs,
kinds of
pine
witchcraft
cones.
stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Her father had a lumber company
Mm-hmm.
and was quite well off. When he first came to Medellin Falls, he had a pack team.
He packed for the government.
And
Wow.
then her mother, Elizabeth Troyer, she was a school teacher, and she came and homesteaded some property.
Yeah,
And that's,
I still have the deed to that property.
To the Grandview property.
No,
No, to the
no,
homestead.
up at, going towards Boundary Dam. To her
Wow.
house, she had a big homestead, 160 acres on Flume Creek.
Really?
Yeah, if I was 20 years younger and in good shape, I'd go live on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, make the government give it back because it's my heritage. Indians can do it, I could do it.
That's right.
Be a squatter.
but her parents had mining claims all over the
Yeah,
Ponderay and that's, she remembers going and to these different claims, and they did things. They walked everywhere, and
Yeah.
that because they didn't drive vehicles. They had
there were no roads, there was trails.
and she would talk about the different canyons and what they looked like since the Boundary Dam went in.
They took all of that away. They gave my mother and my uncle $1 apiece. And took all the claims.
Where the viewpoint is for Boundary Dam,
Yeah.
that you go up to Canada, that was their
That was
property.
their property.
And they gave them $1 apiece for that.
Years later.
They condemned it and took it, stole it from them.
And,
Wow.
But,
Really happy people.
yeah.
And
She
right
wa-
around the Depression time, they used to live in Huffine's house there.
Yeah, that's where.
That's
they,
where she was born.
Really?
In
Uh-huh.
that big house at Huffines. They had
Wow.
that built. That
She was born in Colville, but that's where she grew up as a small girl. And
They had money.
they had money. He lost over $1 million of logs on the river.
In 1920.
In 1929.
Wow.
And the
And
crash finished him off. The
And
depression.
that's when they lost most everything, but they still had the house, but then they had to sell that
Yeah,
house.
they sold the house to survive.
And that.
So instead of being millionaires, we just dirt poor folk. But
Okay, so let's see, Aunt Betty, what's the funniest thing you remember her ever doing?
God, I don't know. She done a lot of funny things.
Well, start at the top.
Well, not really funny things, but funny things. I guess there wasn't too many funny things. I can't think of any that was funny.
Something made you laugh. So what was it? I think you're holding back on us.
Well, if you're talking about skeletons.
No, we're not talking about skeletons. This isn't a skeleton tape.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
Then tell me about your dad.
he came to Washington from Michigan,
Yeah.
and he was a government packer. Worked for the government. Worked for the Forest Service there at Sullivan Lake.
Cool.
And him and Mom got married in April 19th. And didn't tell anybody, and didn't tell my mom's parents until September 1st. So we always figured that September 1st was their anniversary until my dad died.
That's how they celebrated it.
Yeah, they celebrated it, and of course they waited 7 years to have kids. Jane, my sister, was the oldest, and but
See, give us time. Give us time.
no, you ain't getting 7 years. I ain't got 7 years. I got to have them now. I want to have them old enough to spoil. But yeah, they Dad logged. He run lumber carrier from Sullivan Lake to the railroad year round. That was kind of a neat feat. I've got a picture of him on the lumber carrier.
Wow.
He was quite a guy. He was a hell of an equipment operator. He didn't go past the 3rd grade, but he could figure out anything needed figuring out.
The reason why he only went to the 3rd grade is because he had 2 younger siblings, and
Yeah.
his mother had died.
Your
And-
grandma, Aunt Betty, and
And
Uncle Don, their mother had died, and his dad, Grandpa Mark, put him on a farm working for room and board for the 3 of them.
Wow.
and they lived in, it was a tent with a wooden floor.
Yeah.
And he would never let anybody eat potato skins at his table, and that because that's what they got was
That's what they
potato
got to eat.
peelings
Was appealing.
from the farmer's wife to
Oh,
eat.
That's all they fed her.
And
Fed
then they
them.
got macaroni,
That and macaroni.
and that's
Wow.
what they ate.
And he had a hard life, and he drank hard, and
He played hard.
he played hard, but he worked hard too. His stress relief was liquor, which a lot of the older generation, that's what they do. And, I never could see that. I mean, I started out wild and willy, but I never did. Once I got married, I settled down quite a bit.
Yeah.
Had something to do with redhead too.
Oh yeah, Redhead didn't drink.
Yeah.
Now she drinks. She goes overboard once about every 4 or 5 years.
We heard about that.
Missy's wedding was the last time she really blew a gasket, wasn't it?
Anything worth doing is worth doing right.
Shit face.
Yeah, she's drinking shit faces. It's a
Uh-oh.
pitcher, a beer pitcher, big beer pitcher, full of all different kind of booze, whiskey, and topped off with a dram or
Rum.
two of pop. And then they give them these big long straws, and everybody puts her and Tom's wife were racing to see who could drain the pitcher the fastest. But we cut her off. I cut her off. I couldn't drink. I was a designated driver.
Yeah.
But
Where were you when man landed on the moon?
where was I when man landed on the moon? That was 1969.
Yes, it was.
I was in school.
Mm-hmm.
I
I
got.
couldn't tell you.
Weren't you up on the slope?
No,
Didn't you?
no.
If you were to ask either one of us, well, where were we when John F. Kennedy was killed? We could tell you.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, say that.
I was in the 5th grade,
Uh-huh.
and Mr. Taylor.
Yeah.
I remember everybody in school crying. And now, I don't think people would cry now. I mean, the older generation would, but the kids, I don't think they're dedicated to our way of life now. You know, so much has changed. But
What happened September 11th? and
yeah, that kind of changed
it
the
really
world.
changed a lot how the world thinks and how the United States and the people think.
They're saying the Pledge of Allegiance in school again, and well, I think they are.
And
Aren't they?
yeah.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
have to. It's always been
Have
a
they?
law to, yeah.
But they do it at the games, and people are holding their hands over their hearts and truly meaning it. And there's no horseplay.
I suppose you went on alert when September 11th.
I guess you could say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But
locked down the base. No, in '69 when man landed on the moon, I must have been in Spokane. I remember doing it, but I don't remember exactly what I was doing.
Yeah. What did you think when the mountain went up?
Didn't know it.
Really?
We were
Yes.
inside the 28-mile blast zone,
Uh-huh.
and we couldn't hear it.
Oh, the
We were
quiet
asleep.
zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we were sleeping.
We were sleeping, and her sister called from Yakima, and you could hear it over the phone. In Yakima, it was just
The thunder.
the
Wow.
thunder and the booming.
And she says you can see this big black cloud coming towards us, towards them.
Yeah, Yakima really got wiped out on
Yeah.
the first douse. We got it on September 25th.
Wow.
when we got the ash this way.
And
But we got a lot finer ash here than they did in Yakima. They got real coarse stuff, but
My grandparents were, it was a Sunday, my grandparents were at church, and they had to drive home to 16th Avenue from the Assembly of God. And it was like snow, but it was so thick you couldn't see, and it would choke out the cars.
it was the
And
first thing that ever happened, like snow, rain, that didn't clean itself up. We physically had to clean it up. Like
Yeah.
snow melts and runs off, and rain runs off, and yeah, it didn't run off. It just stuck.
Uh huh. Now,
And
did you feel at all threatened
No,
by the
no.
mountain, or
no, we didn't feel threatened, but we watched on TV all the mud flows and everything. And that was really scary because we knew where the Tootle Bridge was and where that log jam had butted up against the freeway there going towards the Cowlitz. We knew that. We knew some of the people. We had been up to Cougar and we'd been to Mount St. Helens before. And we met Harry Truman.
Yeah, we. met
Oh, wow.
Harry
Yeah, and Lake before. And
Spirit
so,
Lake.
Spirit Lake.
But in 1981, we went on strike at the mine, and I went down to Tootle and run equipment on the Tootle River
really?
to clean up the ash.
What'd you do?
I run scraper for 5 weeks. A scraper, you get a load in the bottom and you can drive off and dump it out. It's a
Wow.
big earth mover, and
They diverted the water so that you
diverted
could
the water, so we got right in the channel and dug out the silt and the
Great.
sand and the gravel. And I did that for 5 weeks. And then I quit and bought a new pickup with what I made down there.
Wow.
And 2 more weeks we settled out at the mine.
Uh-huh.
So we had a 2-week vacation. We had to go back to work at the mine, but
Great.
But he took us, we were able to go in there and see where that mud flow had come down, where this road was, and to see,
50 feet tall,
yes,
where the mud line was on the side
coming
of the river.
down the
Wow.
channel.
It picked up a cabin, literally picked
This
it
is a
up
friend of ours' cabin.
and moved it a mile and a half
Adlands.
down the river and set it down, and it didn't knock the salt and pepper shakers off the shelves.
They had to
Oh, wow.
dismantle tear it down because it wasn't on their property anymore. But it physically just picked it up and moved it down. It was
Wow.
And then that next summer, we took a trip with the pickup and camper with the kids, and we went from Randall back over. And as soon as they opened that up, and where you could see all the trees, and
All of the
that-
trees are blown down the same direction. Looks like God just whacked it with his hand, and I mean big timber. And really, at that time, it was nothing was growing. It was just like a desert.
it was eerie.
It was eerie to drive up through this and see. And then when you got to the top, you could see Mount St. Helens,
What was left
what
of
was
it?
left of it, and what was left of Spirit Lake.
And it blew a cubic
Cubic
mile,
Cubic mile
off the top
of
of
dirt
that
off
mountain.
the top.
Wow.
That's quite a bit of dirt.
Yes, it is.
I'm gonna make you keep turning that camera.
It's all right. I can do that. I can do that. Okay, we've got about 20 minutes left. Start figuring funny stuff that you want to chime in with.
Hitchhiking to town from the flats.
Well, we used to leave the house, and that was twisty, about a mile and a half down from our house to town. And there's big switchbacks. Well, car'd come along and you'd hitchhike. And if they stopped and picked you up, fine. And if they didn't, that was fine. You'd bail off through the brush, and they'd go down and around this big switchback, and you'd be standing there hitchhiking again when they drove by. 9 times out of 10, they'd stop and pick you up. How'd you do that? But That was a hitchhiking to town.
Fishing in Lures Pond.
Never did it.
Say that to me, die,
Not on film.
Unconfirmed reports report that Dad and some friends went fishing in a private pond that stocked giant trout. Never
Yeah.
confirmed.
Never confirmed.
We can
But
either
damn, do
confirm
they
or
taste
deny
good.
those accusations at this time.
They would take and as Ken was growing up, his father, they had horses, and they'd take pack. They'd go up into the mountains there, and they'd take.
Yeah, tell us about the old time hunting trips with Uncle Don and everybody.
Yeah.
Now you go packing into a place where animals hasn't seen humans ever, you know. You go 20, 30 miles back behind Lime Lake and up in the
Wow.
below Sullivan Mountain there, and hunt was cool. I didn't get to go too much because Dad did most of that hunting before I was old enough to hunt, but we got to go a couple, 3 times.
There's
Yeah.
a place called Gypsy Meadows up
Yeah.
there, and
Yeah.
that was a favorite.
Yeah, that
Place.
was a favorite place to go.
Wow.
He camped down and go down into the Salmo River, which he was actually in Canada, but you know, now you can't go into any of that country.
Why?
They've shut it off because it's a grizzly bear habitat. Government.
Can you get up to Gypsy Meadows?
Yeah, you can get to Gypsy Meadows,
Yeah.
but you can't get down into the Salmo.
They
built-
ditched almost every other side road.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
they've-
all gated or ditched.
They're replanting all of the problem grizzly bears from
Yeah.
Yellowstone.
Up there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What's the of all the times you've been hunting, what's the most memorable you got? Most impressive.
When we'd go hunting over there and that, and when Mom was still alive, she
Yeah.
would go along when they'd go, and she would tell them stories about her childhood.
Her childhood, and it was really interesting because Grandpa had built the Diamond Match used to be Sawmill Company. They made matches, and they still make diamond matches, wooden matches. Well, they were all over the country there, and Grandpa'd go in and build these camps for them. And so it was kind of neat when Mom and us go hunting, we'd see these ruins of cabins and shit that Grandpa had built.
Wow.
And you could almost picture, you know,
We
course
we went to the Copper Camp. Is
the
that
copper camp.
where Uncle Bill was? And Ken used to go and spend
Yeah, when
time
I was
there.
8 years old, I used to spend summers with Uncle Bill at the copper camp, which was this giant cabin about 16 foot square. It really shrunk up when I took my family there, but when I was a little kid, it was big.
And he talks about this river with this huge log.
Huge log to cross, and the log's about this big around. But I swear, when I was a kid, it was that big.
Wow.
But it wasn't. I mean, and you'd run across the river on the log. And of course, it wasn't a river, it's a creek. And you didn't have to worry about when we were there. It didn't have enough water in it to worry about. But,
Couldn't float a cork.
And they'd make homemade root
Root
beer.
Uncle Bill had a spring there where the cabin was, and he had a spring box made. And you'd make homemade root beer and put it in the spring water. And it'd be ice cold on a hot day, and homemade Hires root beer. Oh, it was
Wow.
good. And you used to lay there in bed at night, and you'd hear this whomp on the steel roof of the cabin, and it'd be flying squirrels hitting the roof. It'd scare the shit out of me and Uncle Bill. And every time one would hit, he'd know I'd be there, you know, eyes wide open. He said, "Just a flying squirrel, son, just a flying squirrel." We used to have my mouse trap. Who could invent the
The better mouse.
better mouse trap? And Uncle Bill would always win, but The best one was a stick on a piece of kindling on the sink with a 5-gallon pail of water, peanut butter on the end of the stick, and he'd walk out there and the stick would fall in the water and mouse drown. Hear that stick fall and you'd know you had a mouse in the bucket, and Uncle Bill would jump out of bed and had this airtight stove, which is a tin sheet metal stove, and you'd put wood in it. Of course it was cold at night, and you'd put wood in it and it just turned cherry white. You could almost think you could see through the metal.
Wow.
It'd get that hot, you know.
Wow.
He'd throw that mouse in the fire, but I'd lay there in bed and the glow of that sheet metal stove, and of course I was 8, 9, 10 years old. I had quite a vivid imagination about it. He had this coon dog named Mud, and one time we were in front of the cabin and Mud was gone. You could hear him, boo, boo. Uncle Bill, I didn't know he could whistle. He put his fingers in his mouth and gave this horrific whistle. God, it stunned old Mud. And you could hear him coming from a mile away. Arr, arr, and he was boomed right down there wondering what the hell was it. He'd never heard of it. But that was a copper camp. We used to go, in the evening we'd take fly rods and go down Sullivan Creek, and we'd catch 30,
You and Uncle Bill.
me and Uncle Bill, we'd catch 30, 40 trout,
Wow.
nice little pan-sized trout, and he'd always make a loaf of bread before we leave, so it was rising, and when we got home he put it in the oven, wood cook stove oven, and he'd fry them fish, and that's what we ate for dinner was fish and
Fresh bread.
fish and fresh bread. God, it was good.
How much copper did you get?
Oh, none. He didn't mind. He did a lot of work for the guy that owned the claim, surveying, and Uncle was a self-taught surveyor and map maker
And geologist.
and
Wow.
geologist. Most of the maps, even the Metzger's maps in Pend County, are at least done, most of them, most of the trails and the stuff by Uncle Bill.
Wow.
He did a lot. And he trapped. He'd stay in the copper camp in the wintertime because he was a boozer. And 3 executives got laid off at Olympia Brewery when he finally quit drinking in 1980. But he'd go out there to dry out. They never plowed the road. The copper camp is about 15 or 20 miles from Sullivan Lake
Wow.
in the
Sullivan
snow.
Lakes.
And you'd have to snowshoe
He'd
Out.
snowshoe out at
Christmas.
Christmas and spend Christmas with us, and then he'd snowshoe back in. But he trapped all winter. Martin and Cougar and
His nickname was Cougar Bill.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
I have a picture in there on the wall of me sitting on a 39 cougar skins
Wow.
that he got in 1 year. That's back when the government had a bounty on cougars.
And he had only one eye.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. When he was in school, he used to pop his bad eye out and let it dangle.
Oh,
By the nerve.
He'd get to go home. Well, he'd never go home. He'd leave school and pop that eye out and go fishing in the river. And the teacher talked to my grandma, and she put him straight to that. Next time he did it, she said, "William, you put that eye back in there and quit that. You don't get to go anywhere." But he was a gamer. He was quite a guy.
Tell me about the funeral.
Oh, he was also a storyteller, unique. Now you think I tell stories? I don't tell stories like Uncle Bill. I mean,
But this is Uncle Bill. He was an old single man, was very meticulous. He kept things
Oh,
just
yeah.
so. And if you came to visit him, there could be a whole room full of people, and he was talking to Ken.
Or one person.
or one person. He did like, we had 3 children, and
He liked me.
he liked our son Jim. And so his conversation controlled around Ken and Jim. The rest of us did not exist.
You could
Wow.
go into his apartment, and he probably hadn't been there in 6 months, and you could move the Zippo lighter on the mantle an inch, and he'd come home 6 months later and say somebody'd been messing with my stuff. He was that meticulous.
Wow.
But yes, Jim's name as soon as we get grandkids is gonna be Unc, because that's what we called Uncle Bill, was Unc.
Yeah. So what about this funeral? It's so funny.
Well, he worked for a guy in Spokane, Jay Eddington, doing underground computerized. He made software of map making underground,
Uh-huh.
and this Jay Eddington made lots of money on it. Uncle Bill didn't get a dime, but Eddington buried him, and Eddington had this long speech of all of the trials and tribulations that Uncle Bill went through, and he single-handedly
Flew up.
flew a P-38 in the war. Well, with one eye, he never got close to the war.
Yeah.
You know, he climbed Mount McKinley in an afternoon. And
But he had an American flag that they gave to Mom at the funeral,
for
too.
the veterans.
From the veterans. And Mom says, I can't take this. He wasn't in the...
Yeah,
in
she
the
had
Air
to give
Force.
it back.
And she gave it back. But Jay swore it, and we had to tell him
They
after he
they
made
were
this-
howling in the aisles.
We're
I was
no.
a kid and I was. They
We
were.
were laughing. We couldn't help it.
Larry Van Dyke and I were just howling because Larry Van Dyke said he was more colorful in death than he was in life. Or just as colorful in death as he was in life.
Sitting at the restaurant, you gave us all ice cream, and you guys sat there and set Jay straight.
Yeah,
He looked like he got shotgunned.
yeah. Poor Jay. But, no, he's gone now.
Yeah. What's another funny one?
Hmm.
Come on, guys.
It's
You
the
always
dumbest
prompt
thing
it.
your kids have ever done to you.
No, that's debatable.
But it's obviously something Jim did, so let's hear it.
What are you thinking of, Jim?
Oh,
He's like, I ain't gonna confess.
Huh?
Did best. Ran away
April
and hid.
1st, about 2.5 years ago.
Oh, well, yeah, Jimmy snuck in and set our clocks back an hour,
And 18 minutes.
and my clock was about that far from my head. I don't know to this day how he did it without waking me up or the damn thing beeping, but he did it.
I got every house except every clock in the house except the computer.
Yeah.
Kathy was late to,
I
thought she was
thought.
late going someplace, and she had to pick up a friend over here. The friend was still in her bra when she got there. We were an hour early for everything.
And mom was never wrong, so
Yeah.
she knew that everybody else's clock was wrong because hers said that. And so they call down. She calls down to Joe's place and asks him what time it is. It's 7:30 in the morning, Kathy. No, it's not. And then she
Oops.
finally calls home, talks to Dad, tells him to turn on the TV. And what time is it? 7:30. All right, I'll be right home. When Dad got off the phone, he figured out what had happened.
Yeah.
Mom, it took her a little bit longer until she stormed into the house and saw that the clock that didn't work anymore was also changed.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
No, we.
First and only practical joke that I've ever played on April 1st.
What was it
Nobody
like trading-
expected it.
What was it like trading your childhood to raise kids?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, we figured when we were young that we'd get the childhood, the kids raised, our family raised. So by the time we were 40, they'd be old enough to be out of the house and and I'd have 20 years till retirement time, to where I'd have the big money coming in where we weren't raising kids, because it cost a lot to raise the kids.
Yeah.
And then by the time we were 50, we'd have grandkids and be able to spoil them while we were in good enough health to enjoy
And travel.
travel.
Yeah.
And
Here's a good one. Of all the places in the world, if you could go to one, where would it be?
if I could do anything that I wanted to do,
Yeah.
now, I didn't at the time, I turned it down, but the company wanted me to be their troubleshooter
For
Really?
Pacific
for,
Corps.
for Pacific Corps, and they have mines in Paraguay and Australia,
You
and
got the offer in what, 93?
yeah.
You were a senior.
Yeah, it was
When
right before my senior year.
Jim was a senior, he was in football, he was in wrestling, and I gave up. I worked shift work all my life, all that 20 years. Very little of it on days. And I gave up when Chris was in football. I had to work. And I didn't make an issue out of it, I worked. Well, I missed a bunch of his childhood that now I can't get back. I'd like to have back, but I can't. It's gone.
Yeah.
And a person doesn't realize that until it's too late. Well, when they offered me this job of Kathy and I could fly all over the world, I mean, and damn near double your salary, you really want to think that through, you know. Well, Jim was in school, and I didn't want to give up his childhood like I did Chris's. So I opted to stay home and go to his football games and
Bruised Gino's arm.
bruise Gino's arm.
Yeah, Gene Luna came with you to him and kept hitting him in the same
Oh,
spot in the shoulder.
yeah. But I didn't. But I'd like to do that job. I think that'd really be a kick in
Be
the
a
butt.
troubleshooter, huh?
They got big mines in Germany, and they
Turkey.
got Turkey. They
you
got some in
go.
Turkey they can't get to because the people are fighting,
Yeah.
and they don't know if they have any equipment left or not. There's no response from the mine.
Really?
I wouldn't want to go on that one too bad, but
Actually, today Turkey's nice. They're not fighting anymore.
yeah.
But no,
I'm doing for the shape I'm in. I'd like to be able to travel more, but
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm comfortable. I enjoy my family, all of my family. I enjoy going over to Kettle,
Yeah.
and I'd rather go see my family than I would travel someplace just to look at the sights. But I have two sisters that I didn't know I had until
until he was 40.
Well,
Just before he turned. Well,
what a surprise.
He knew about him when Debbie was born.
when Debbie was born.
That's when he found out.
Dad was down getting gassed up, celebrating,
Uh-huh.
and I said, "Well, Dad, how's it feel like to be a granddad?"
Quit looking.
He said, "Well, son, I've been a granddad for a long time." And
Like one of Ken's nephews is almost as old as he is.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
Reuben.
he was married in Michigan before he came out here, and divorced, and he had two daughters. So I have two half sisters that live in California. And out of the blue, one night she called, and Jim happened to answer.
The
phone.
worst person in the family possible that could answer the phone answered the phone.
Because he lives in this mushroom.
Uh-huh.
Because I'm a mushroom. And I couldn't tell you, you know, at the time I couldn't have told you, you know,
She
which
wanted
relative
to know
was.
Mom's phone number.
Well, she was asking about, you know, Don and that, if she would have said, Angus Martin, yeah, I know him. I didn't know this Don.
Yeah. Well, they live in California, and they came up the first summer that.
You
Right.
met for the first time. We went down there
That's right.
for your birthday.
We went
I
down in
surprised
March, and
you. Really, come.
we met Madam Brood, get over here. And then they came up here and met the family. in
And that was
Medley
over
Falls.
Labor Day,
Yeah, they flew up.
and we
here.
went to Medellin Falls.
But it's been almost 9 years
Mm-hmm.
since we were down there
And they came up.
and they were up here. So I'd like to go down there and spend some time with them. It seems like every time we get money enough and then want to take the time, I get sick. So that hasn't happened yet. But I'd like to spend more time with them, get to know them a little better.
Sisters.
Sisters.
So they're older than you.
Yeah, my oldest is 62, my youngest is 60,
Wow.
No, 59.
59.
Huh.
And I always thought my weight was in characteristics with my mother. But my weight actually came from our dad's side of it.
Really?
Yeah. My sister Jean weighs 500 pounds if she weighs an ounce.
Yeah.
And my sister Pat is skinny, like
Jane was.
Jane was skinny. My
Yeah.
sister Jane was
Like
skinny.
Tom.
Yeah.
Tom
Oh
is
God,
skinny.
I haven't heard his name in a while.
And Carl and I are bigger.
Yeah.
But Jean is big, her daughter is big, and they all look. Gail, your Aunt Gail, she's big,
Uh-huh.
and her daughter is big, and it's all out of the Martin genes.
Huh.
Now you'll probably have some big kids, maybe, but none of your family is big. Your mother's small,
Mm-hmm.
but Gail is big. Barbara was bigger,
Yeah.
but she never had any kids. But that's kind of interesting
Yeah.
to meet somebody that, and
Yeah.
of course they didn't have any information about Dad at all, and we took a suitcase full of pictures with us and dumped out on the table, and
Uh-huh.
we don't believe in albums.
Oh, we have some.
That'd be too convenient. We just got a suitcase full. And-
Okay, now I'm going to stop you real quick. We got 3 minutes left.
Okay.
I've done interviews with several different family members, and I always ask them the same question at the end. And you got 3 minutes to play with it. Way down the line, when he's a granddad, if we deal with technology and they actually get to see this tape, what do you want to tell them? His great grandkids. What do you want to tell them?
Lucky bastards that they are.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. If we'd have known how Chris was going to turn out, his name would have been Birth Control. No, not really. What I'd want to tell his kids, his grandkids. God, I don't really, that would be a question.
I have an answer.
Well, answer.
My answer is that it doesn't matter how much money you make or what you do in life, is that you're a family and that you're loved and you support each other.
Yeah.
And you remember God is first, your husband, and your family. And if you can keep those priorities in perspective, that is what is important in life.
Yeah.
And to love and trust each other and support each other.
Well, that's,
I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for her. Not what, because I was a wild individual. I had hot cars, drank a lot. She steadied me out, got me on the upswing of being a parent. For the last 9 years, she's done everything that I need to have done. She's done it.
Outstanding. Well, wave goodbye.